The glass shattered before anyone could move. A silver trophy hit the marble floor of the hotel ballroom, breaking into 3 pieces as Elena Vale, the 36-year-old CEO of Vale Urban Design, stared at the enormous presentation screen behind her. Nothing was loading. The investor meeting was supposed to begin in 90 seconds. Her company's future was sitting in that room. Then a quiet voice came from behind the curtain. "May I take a look?" Elena turned sharply. A man in a maintenance uniform stood there holding a toolbox. His name tag read Mason Reed. She almost laughed. "You fix elevators," she said. Mason glanced at the frozen screen. "Mostly. But broken is broken." He stepped toward the equipment. Elena folded her arms. "Fix this, and I'm yours." She meant it as a joke. Mason didn't smile. He simply looked at her and said, "You might want to be careful what you promise." Then he crouched beside the equipment. And within 30 seconds, he discovered something nobody else had noticed. The presentation hadn't crashed. Someone had deliberately disconnected it. Mason Reed wasn't supposed to be anywhere near Elena Vale that morning. He was a contracted maintenance technician working the hotel's convention floor, the kind of man guests rarely noticed unless something stopped working. He was 41, raising his 9-year-old daughter, Lily, alone. Every morning began at 5:30. Lunches packed, hair brushed, school drop-off, then work until evening. His apartment wasn't fancy, and his old truck made a sound every time he turned the ignition that suggested it had personal grievances against him. But Lily never complained. She had learned that love didn't always arrive wrapped in comfort. Sometimes it looked like her father fixing a leaking faucet at midnight. Sometimes it was him pretending he wasn't tired so she could finish telling him about school. That morning, however, Mason had received a message from the school. "Lily has been having trouble seeing the board. Please schedule an eye examination." He stared at the message for several seconds. He knew what that meant. Another bill. Another thing he couldn't easily afford. Still, he put the phone away and went to work. Because fathers don't always get the luxury of falling apart. Inside the ballroom, Elena's investors were becoming restless. Her biggest development project, a massive community housing complex, was minutes away from receiving final approval. If the presentation failed, the investors could walk. Elena's reputation had been built on never losing control. But Mason noticed something strange. He pulled a small cable from behind the console. The cable had been cut cleanly. Not unplugged. Cut. Elena's expression changed. "Who would do that?" Mason looked at the equipment. "Someone who wanted you to think it was an accident." Before Elena could answer, the ballroom doors opened. The investors entered. Mason quickly repaired the connection. The screen came alive. Elena walked onto the stage. The presentation worked perfectly, but Mason noticed another problem. One of the financial projections on the screen was wrong. Very wrong. If Elena presented those numbers, the investors would believe the project was millions of dollars less profitable than it actually was. He whispered from the side, "Slide 17. Elena glanced at him. "What?" "Check slide 17. She did. Her face went pale. Someone had replaced the original figures. Again, Mason had just saved her twice. After the meeting, Elena found him in the service corridor. "You knew what was wrong." "I noticed. You understand financial projections?" Mason shrugged. "My wife used to." Elena stopped. It was the first time he'd mentioned her. "She worked in accounting?" "Construction finance." A pause. "She died 4 years ago." Elena's expression softened. "I'm sorry." Mason nodded. "She was good at numbers. Better than me." Then he picked up his toolbox. Elena watched him walk away. There was something about him she couldn't explain. He didn't seem impressed by her wealth. He didn't seem intimidated by her title. And somehow, that bothered her. 2 days later, Elena discovered why. An internal audit revealed that someone had been quietly manipulating financial data for months. The person responsible was her chief financial officer. But there was a bigger problem. He had already convinced the board that Elena's housing project was financially unstable. The board planned to remove her as CEO if she couldn't prove otherwise. Elena had one chance. She asked Mason to help reconstruct the original numbers. He hesitated. "I fix machines. You fixed my presentation." "That was luck." "No," Elena said. "It wasn't." For the first time, Mason smiled. Then he agreed. They worked late into the night. Not romantically. Not dramatically. Just 2 exhausted people surrounded by spreadsheets and cold coffee. At midnight, Elena noticed Mason staring at his phone. A photo of Lily filled the screen. She has an eye appointment tomorrow, he said. You should go. I can't afford to miss work. Elena quietly looked away. The next morning, she arranged for him to take the day off. Mason refused the money she offered. I don't need charity. I didn't offer charity. Then what? Elena paused. A fair chance. The truth finally broke open during the emergency board meeting. Mason presented the reconstructed financial records. The CFO tried to dismiss him. He's a maintenance worker. Mason didn't react. Instead, he placed one final document on the table. It showed the exact timestamps of every altered file and the login history. The CFO had used his own credentials. Silence filled the room. Elena looked at Mason. How did you find this? He answered quietly. Your system wasn't broken. Someone just assumed nobody would check the maintenance logs. The board turned against the CFO. Elena kept her company, but she also made a decision nobody expected. She canceled the luxury executive expansion plan for the following year. Instead, she redirected the money into the housing project. Affordable homes. Real homes. For families who had spent years believing they would never own one. When Mason asked why, she gave him a simple answer. My father used to say a company isn't successful because it makes money. It's successful when the money gives people somewhere to stand. Mason smiled. Your father sounds like a good man. He was. Months later, Mason stood outside a newly completed apartment building. Lily ran through the front entrance carrying a backpack. Dad, he turned. She threw her arms around him. Her new glasses caught the afternoon sunlight. Mason closed his eyes for a moment. He had worried for months about how he would pay for them. He hadn't realized that sometimes life didn't remove your problems. Sometimes it simply placed the right people beside you while you faced them. Elena approached from behind. She had changed too. Less polished, less guarded, more human. She handed Mason a small envelope. Inside was a job offer, not as an executive, not as a charity case, but as a facilities project manager overseeing the company's new housing communities. Mason stared at it. You trust me with this? Elena smiled. I trust the man who doesn't walk away when something is broken. He looked at her. And that promise? She laughed softly. The one about being yours? Mason smiled. You're still thinking about that? Elena looked at Lily, then back at him. Maybe. Mason shook his head. Then fix your wording next time. For once, Elena laughed without worrying about who was listening. And Mason realized something he had forgotten after years of surviving alone. Sometimes the person who changes your life isn't the one who rescues you. It's the one who sees your worth while you're still busy trying to hold everything together. Because broken things don't always need replacing. Sometimes, they just need someone patient enough to believe they're worth fixing.